They're making you sound cheesier by the minute. Just say yes. Yes, 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 yes. Jin-Woo had said everything he wanted to Baru, so he happily headed off to meet Thomas. Oh, Mr. Sung. I've been waiting for this moment forever. Thomas greeted him excitedly. Receiving gifts feels great. But Thomas thought giving them brought its own joy. Since Jin-Woo had asked for a dagger, he couldn't wait to surprise him with the best weapon from the guild's storage, weapon that had been waiting just for this moment. Thomas hadn't come here for no reason. He was super excited to see how his favorite hunter would react to these amazing gifts. With a snap of his fingers, the bodyguards rolled in a big box covered with cloth. The truth was, Jin-Woo wasn't super excited about the gift. He already had everything he needed, but he was still curious to see what Thomas had brought. His eyes lit up as the bodyguards approached. What's going on? Then came a strange humming noise. Hamavaloo. Vote. Ingrid felt his magic buzzing, connecting with something inside the box. Thomas couldn't help but grin as he saw Jin-Woo's reaction change. I knew it. Thomas had been right all along. Jin-Woo would recognize the daggers as his own, and they'd know him as their master too. The time had come for his prediction to prove true. These weapons had waited patiently in the dark storage room of the Scavenger Guild for this exact moment. Hi-Pack. The box was set down on the table between the two S-rank hunters. This is to thank you for sparing my guild and me. Mr. Sung, Thomas said as he carefully pulled off the cloth. Underneath was a clear case holding two daggers resting on a massive scale. Jin-Woo wondered if daggers was even the right word for them. The daggers were a bit shorter than swords but longer than regular daggers. But what really caught Jin-Woo's eye wasn't their size, it was their color. They were as white as freshly fallen snow. These weapons weren't made of metal, but something else entirely. It reminded him of his very first dagger, Kasaka's Venom Fang, which he'd gotten in an instance dungeon. That made him realize these daggers were probably made from the fang of a magic beast. There's just one dead magic beast whose body parts can give off this kind of energy. Thomas shook his head in amazement, clapping his hands together. Wow, Jin-Woo, you're spot on. These guys are made from exactly what you thought they were. Jin-Woo was right. But that brought up another question. Aren't the remains stored at the Hunter Command Center? He asked. Thomas smirked. We handed over Kamish's remains to the US government when they asked. But here's the thing, we knew those remains could be worth more than any amount of money. He grinned, clearly proud of what they'd pulled off during the raid against Kamish. I kept Kamish's biggest and sharpest fang as a souvenir. I yanked it out myself when that nasty dragon bit me. No one, not even the most powerful beings, could turn a dragon's fang into a weapon, except for one person. Thomas told me that the craftsman, who made these amazing weapons, had passed away from old age, so no one else would ever create anything from dragon remains again. Back then, the fang was too short to make a sword, so the craftsman turned it into these daggers instead. Looks like choosing this path was the right move, Thomas said with a grin as he filled Jin-Woo in on what had gone down earlier. He carefully opened the case, revealing the dragon scale where the daggers were embedded. These are yours now, he said, handing them over. Finally, the legendary weapons were back in the hands of the greatest warrior. Thomas held his breath as Jin-Woo's eyes lit up with surprise. Jin-Woo pulled out one of the daggers, shinning. The blade slid out smoothly, like it was eager to see action. Suddenly, a sharp ping rang out, and Jin-Woo swallowed hard. Before he could even react, the dagger's stats popped up right in front of him. His eyes widened in disbelief. What was going on? Jin-Woo couldn't believe what he was seeing, so he pulled out the Demon Monarch's dagger. This epic weapon, with a super tough acquisition rating, was his go-to for battles. The dagger, once owned by Balan, had an attack power of 20 and some cool bonuses. When Jin-Woo used two of these daggers together, they unlocked a powerful double boost. This made each dagger strike with extra force, based on Jin-Woo's strength, which was over 300. With both daggers in hand, his total attack power skyrocketed to over 500, making him almost unstoppable. The set buff was super useful, but nothing could have prepared Jin-Woo for what he was about to see. His eyes widened as he compared his old weapon to the new one. It was no contest. Are you serious? Jin-Woo muttered, staring at the dagger in disbelief. It was crafted from the fang of Kamish, a fierce dragon. The info screen in front of him had some mind-blowing details. Ilitium, Kamish's wrath, acquisition difficulty, Panache, category, Ak dagger, at pack power, at plus fun 500s. This wasn't just any dagger. It was top tier, forged by a master craftsman using the sharpest dragon fang. It was said to have no equal. What really caught Jin-Woo's eye was how the dagger could amplify its strength, based on the user's skill and mana sensitivity. But all he could focus on was that jaw-dropping attack power. 1500. That's just the base attack before any enhancements. Jin-Woo couldn't wrap his head around it. This weapon was on a whole different level. Whoa! Jin-Woo couldn't believe what he was seeing. A higher attack power meant this dagger would slice through enemies effortlessly, like cutting through butter. Wait a second, he thought. Is there another dagger out there that's even close to this one? Without hesitation, Jin-Woo pulled up the system shop, not caring if everyone else stared at him. He was too busy trying to wrap his head around just how awesome this weapon was. Jin-Woo didn't think much of the daggers because they just weren't powerful enough, so he decided to check out the swords instead. Even the most expensive sword in the shop wasn't that impressive, with a power level of just over 1000. Still, holding it made him imagine wielding two swords at once and feeling like a total boss. He gripped the dagger tightly, eager to try it out on anything. Thomas noticed how focused Jin-Woo looked and let out an awkward laugh. "Whoa, Mr. Sung," Thomas exclaimed, pretending to panic. "Even if I boost my defense with a skill, that dagger would slice through me like butter. You're not planning to stab me with the gift I just handed you, are you?" Jin-Woo burst out laughing at Thomas's over-the-top reaction. He turned his attention back to the dagger in his hand. It was supposed to be sensitive to mana, whatever that meant. Curious, Jin-Woo sent a tiny pulse of his magic into the blade. "Whoa," one of the bodyguards blurted out, despite their training to stay silent. He slapped his hand over his mouth. But no one noticed because all eyes were on Jin-Woo. Oh my god, Thomas had seen some wild stuff in his life, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The black aura swirling around the dagger left him completely blown away. It wasn't just any ordinary glow, the dagger was actually reacting to his magic. The heavy weight in his hand vanished in an instant. It felt like magic. Instead of that weight, he held a dagger so light it could have been made of feathers. Twow! This weapon actually changed its weight based on how you fought. Twow! Mom? Vow? Mao? Thomas's wrath quivered, almost like it was saying hello to its new owner. Jin-Woo gripped the handle tightly, his heart pounding fast. Thump thump. He wasn't sure if this urge was coming from him or the dagger itself, but he couldn't wait to fight someone and swing his awesome new weapon around. Jin-Woo took a deep breath and slammed the dagger back into the scale with a sharp shot. The blade stopped quivering and Laura along with the bodyguards sighed in relief as the dark aura faded away. Thomas shot Laura a look, silently asking if she still thought he'd made a bad call. Laura shook her head, agreeing that his decision was right, because those daggers were meant for magic beasts, not people. These weapons have finally found their true owner. Laura wasn't special in terms of magics. She couldn't feel it at all, but she instantly knew something was different. Thomas beamed with pride. He had been right all along. "How do you like my gifts, Mr. Sung?" he asked. Sometimes big feelings show more through actions than words. Jin-Woo flashed him a quiet thumbs up. "Ha," Thomas said, slowly clapping, clearly amused. The daggers were like a symbol of their friendship, and Thomas didn't mind giving them up one bit, if it meant winning Jin-Woo over. But Jin-Woo wasn't so sure about this deal. "Are you serious? Can I really have these for free?" he asked. "Free?" Thomas's grin disappeared in an instant. Jin-Woo chuckled as he agreed. "Fine, I'll take them." Thomas's serious expression didn't change, but Jin-Woo could tell he was relieved underneath. "Glad you see it my way," Thomas said, sounding a bit lighter. For a moment, everything felt okay between them, but then, without warning, both of them froze. Just as Laura and the bodyguards were about to freak out over the shocked looks on everyone's faces, Thomas broke the silence. "Mr. Sung, what just?" he started to say. Jin-Woo nodded briefly, but both of them had just felt chills run down their spines because of something in the sky. Without hesitation, Jin-Woo nodded briefly, but both of them had just felt chills run down their spines because of something in the sky. Jin-Woo muttered, stunned. Thomas's eyes went wide with shock as they stared at an enormous gate hovering above the earth. "This can't be happening," Jin-Woo said, his voice shaking in disbelief. "Whoa, that's the biggest gate I've ever seen." Thomas had been one of the first hunters to wake up. But even after all these years he'd never laid eyes on anything this huge. Kamisha's gate wasn't even this massive. Jin-Woo, though, had seen something just like it once before in the data from that angel statue. It was the same gate where those winged soldiers had poured out. And right now, hovering above Seoul, was an exact copy of it. Jin-Woo freaked out as he remembered the sky turning pitch black because of so many soldiers. Could this be why scientists had noticed all that creepy dark stuff gathering around Seoul? Jin-Woo was speechless, and so were the Americans in the room with him. The room fell into a heavy silence. The gigantic gate shook silently, like it was about to swallow everything in the world. People who knew that a brand new gate wasn't in danger of a dungeon breaking stood below, snapping pictures of this massive thing that blotted out the sky. This gate was super cool, but also super scary. It was the first one ever to show up floating in midair, and the biggest anyone had ever seen. People couldn't help but wonder what kind of creatures might be inside. Even though it was a mystery, foreign reporters were there too, busy capturing the excitement on camera. Yes, I'm standing under this massive gate here in Seoul, South Korea, one reporter said. This is the biggest gate anyone has ever seen since Magic Beast first appeared. The crowd was huge, and everybody's eyes were fixed on it. Something big was happening. The serious looks on their faces told the whole story. This is Nick Falwell from BBN News. They shared updates about what was happening in their own languages, their expressions grave. Meanwhile, Japan, which had been closely watching its neighbor, launched a special news program, focused on the mysterious gate in Seoul's sky. Then they brought in Dr. Norman Belzer, a scientist who had been tracking this strange event for a while. As soon as the host introduced him, Dr. Belzer held up his microphone and said, "I've been warning everyone about this huge energy mass gathering in the sky. The gigantic gate that appeared over Seoul is just the start. I think we'll see more of these super creepy gates popping up in other countries too." The host looked spooked by what he heard. "Are you saying these warning signs are showing up in even more places?" Dr. Belzer nodded firmly. "Exactly. That's what I'm trying to stress." He then launched into the same passionate talk he'd given to the hunters at the International Guild Conference. Since his research dealt with real dangers that could hurt people, he felt it was his responsibility to spread the word. Seoul was just the beginning. Dark matter was gathering in 8 more areas around the world, and Dr. Belzer was about to reveal exactly where. The studio crowd gasped as he showed the 9 locations, each with its own aerial photo. Some people felt a little better when they saw Japan wasn't on the list, but others were totally freaked out by how serious things were getting. The host turned to Dr. Belzer, who looked really serious. "You've spent years studying gates and magic beasts, right?" he asked. Dr. Belzer nodded. "So, what's the best way to handle this situation?" Everyone in the studio, and all the viewers at home held their breath, waiting for his answer. Dr. Belzer shook his head. "We don't have an easy answer for this," he admitted to the crowd. He looked around the room, his voice serious. "All we can do now is hope that this tough situation doesn't end terribly." The studio fell silent, and the mood felt heavy with worry. But then Dr. Belzer added, "There is one small positive thing to hold on to." His words brought a glimmer of hope, just as the show was about to end. Maybe they could end the show on a positive note. Dr. Belzer, an astrophysicist known for his work with NASA, was about to speak when he said something unexpected. "The gate is over Korea." The audience was shocked. Did he have something against Korea? The producer's eyes widened in panic, worried that this comment might cause international tension. But Dr. Belzer quickly clarified, "Korea is home to a special hunter who has stopped several global disasters." He went on, "I'm talking about Hunter Jin-Woo Sung, who dealt with those giant ants on Jeju Island, and defeated the giants in Japan. Interestingly, the strongest hunter in the world lived where dark matter was most concentrated, something Dr. Belzer didn't think was a coincidence. If Hunter Sung can't stop the gate, he concluded, no one can." "Should we be thankful or feel sorry for Korea?" Dr. Belzer asked, leaving his audience even more confused. "Koreans might think I'm being harsh," he said firmly, "but the world doesn't need to feel bad about what's happening in Korea." The producer had been worried about how this would all play out, and now it seemed like those worries weren't completely off track. Dr. Belzer almost seemed to be enjoying the producer's frustration as he dropped another bombshell. "If we ever reach a point where we need to mourn for Korea, there won't be anyone left to do the mourning. Up until now, the biggest gate ever recorded was Kamakusha's gate in the US, but this new one in Korea was at least 10 times larger. You didn't need any official test to tell how dangerous the situation was, but the association still followed the rules. They sent a helicopter with a pilot, co-pilot, and 2 crew members. Everyone on board was a trained hunter because ordinary people wouldn't survive the massive amounts of magic power swirling around. As they flew closer, the helicopter vibrated like crazy. It felt like being pulled into a giant black hole. The air buzzed with an eerie energy, making everyone's skin crawl. One of the crew members stared out at the huge black circle ahead and turned to his colleague. "Hey, have you ever seen anything like this before?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. The sunlight was gone, so they had to rely on the helicopter's lights to see. But even in the dark, the sheer size of the glowing gate was impossible to ignore. The older crew member shook his head, his face pale. "No," he muttered. "Nothing like this. No way. And I'm sure nobody else on Earth has ever laid eyes on a gate this massive." The whole world was freaking out because of this gigantic gate that had appeared in such an unexpected place. If only people knew that even the famous Thomas Andre was shocked by it, they might not have been so scared. The workers tried to stay calm as they stared at this enormous thing. The helicopter started hovering because it was getting too risky to fly any closer. The co-pilot shouted, "It's too risky to go nearer." Everyone nodded, understanding the risk. They readied themselves to check out just how powerful this gate really was. They often walked boldly up to the front of gates, but this time, they didn't need to get close. As soon as they flipped on their manometer, it freaked out and quit working. Their instruments couldn't handle the massive amount of magic pouring from the gate, just like they'd expected. "Sir," said the junior employee, after noticing the senior's nod. The senior quickly grabbed a communication device and opened a line to the Hunters Association, ready to share their findings. Just as they were about to report, the senior suddenly shouted, "Look out!" Startled, the junior flinched and glanced around in every direction, unsure of what was happening. "What is it? I think I saw something strange outside. Like a beast or something." "A beast? Already? That can't be right. It shouldn't have been possible for anything to escape so soon." But the senior employee was no ordinary person. He was a high-ranking hunter with skills way beyond everyone else in the helicopter. And sure enough, there it is, he shouted, pointing to what he'd seen earlier. Just then Jinchul's voice crackled urgently through the headset. "What? Whoa, what's going on? Sangwon you. What's happening?" "To President Wu. It's a giant monster. A gigantic magic creature has been spotted near the helicopter." "What? Are you serious? But this isn't just any ordinary monster. You can't take on a flying magic beast. That's not what I sent you there to check out." "Land right now." "No, wait, that's not it. President Wu, someone is riding that magic beast." "What? How could anyone ride a magic Jin?" Jinchul hesitated, remembering something. "Sangwon, can you see who's riding the magic beast?" "Hold on. I can barely see his face," someone said. "Is that Hunter Jin-Woo Sung?" Another voice asked curiously. Sangwon squinted harder, pressing his face against the window. "Sir, how did you know?" He burst out in shock. Then a loud screech echoed through the air. Jin-Woo was riding Kaizel, his winged dragon, straight toward the gate. As they flew right under it, Jin-Woo gazed up and felt a shiver run down his spine. The gate didn't look like an entrance. It looked more like staring into a bottomless black lake. The gate was massive, so big it almost felt overwhelming. The magic pouring out of it was so strong that a regular hunter would have been totally overwhelmed. But Jin-Woo, he didn't even flinch, realizing it was too dangerous to hang around. The association's helicopter quickly flew away, keeping low to the ground. Jin-Woo watched them go, then moved closer to the mysterious gate. The opening faced the ground, and now he was close enough to reach out and touch it. The black covering still hid what was inside, so he had no clue what awaited him. If he poked at it, would his finger go through, or would he get sucked in like with that red gate? Maybe he could figure this out before things went wrong. Jin-Woo curiously placed his hand on the gate's membrane. This was weird. He had never encountered anything like this as a hunter. The black membrane felt solid, almost like a thick wall, stopping his hand from passing through. If this were any ordinary wall, he could easily smash through it. But something about this one was different. Jin-Woo pushed against the membrane with all his strength, but it wouldn't move an inch. He scrunched up his face in confusion, and tapped on the surface a few times. This didn't make sense. He had never heard of a gate that could stop someone like him, an awakened being. Something was definitely off here. This was a new feeling for him. He always thought there was a reason he was picked to be the player, and given such amazing powers by the system. Maybe it was all leading up to this moment. But then, Jin-Woo paused, looking a bit puzzled. "Wait, what's going on with me?" he muttered, shaking his head. He chuckled, feeling a little silly for getting so worked up, and pulled his hand back from the gate. Just as he did, his phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the silence. The phone call was one Jin-Woo had been waiting for from the Hunters Association of Japan. "Hello, Hunter-sung," a voice asked. "Yes, that's me," Jin-Woo replied with a grin. He was standing high above the city, where the buildings looked like tiny toy blocks. The caller said, "Sorry, but it's hard to hear you. Should I call back later?" Jin-Woo chuckled to himself as he gazed out at the miniature world below. "No, I can hear you just fine," he said cheerfully. Jin-Woo was high above somewhere. "Is this about my request?" he asked. The man from the Hunters Association nodded. "Yes, I just checked all of Japan using a satellite, but," he trailed off, which was unusual because he always knew what to say. Now he looked worried. Jin-Woo couldn't guess what the man would say next. Then came the shocking words, "There's no gate." Wait, not even one new gate has shown up in Japan. Jin-Woo was shocked. After defeating the giants, he'd been spending all his time raiding dungeons in Japan. This news caught him completely off guard. "Not even one?" Jin-Woo asked, disbelief dripping from his voice. The representative nodded grimly. "Yes, that's right. I reached out to hunter groups in other countries to see if this was just happening here. But," he paused, looking frustrated. "Ever since that huge gate appeared over Seoul 3 hours ago, all the other gates have vanished into thin air." How could every single gate in the world disappear at the exact same time? That's way beyond weird. Jin-Woo stood there, frozen, staring up at the dark mass hovering above him. The representative spoke up cautiously. Excuse me, but why did you want me to find the highest ranking gate we have?" That's Jin-Woo didn't say a word. He had no idea how to explain himself. Jin-Woo wondered how to explain that he wanted to test Thomas's gift of 1500 attack power before the gate opened. "Even if tomorrow the world falls apart," he said, quoting something he'd once heard, "someone still needs to plant an apple tree." The representative paused, sounding confused. "Oh, apple trees. I see. That's a pretty cool saying." Jin-Woo was ready to end the call after giving such a vague response, but the representative seemed like he had more to say. Hunter-sung," Jin-Woo replied. The man hesitated, almost as if he felt embarrassed. Then he blurted out his confession. "I was never a fan of Korea." Remember those super annoying ants from Jeju Island? They've been causing trouble for the Hunters Association in Japan for years. As a Japanese person, and someone who works there, I didn't have much respect for Korea. Jin-Woo listened quietly as the man continued. "But you're the one who changed my mind. Korea saved us," the leader said with tears in their eyes. Thank you to you and your country." The representative broke down sobbing, overwhelmed with emotion. "From the bottom of my heart," they continued, "I hope Korea never has to endure the same terrors we faced." The memories were still raw, giants stomping through streets, cities in flames, people screaming, and a feeling of hopeless despair that seemed endless. It hadn't been long since this nightmare became reality, and the representative had lived through every horrifying moment firsthand.